All right, Biggie, you have any good questions this week?
Once again, we're going to go to Instagram.
I know I like the different kind of question you get on that platform. It's funny.
I would think about it. I think it's really because I did it for so long on Facebook,
Yeah.
and kind of getting the same questions from people. Always want to have questions, and Instagram is giving me a different crowd.
Yeah, different
so
pool.
We're getting some different questions. So I have a couple of good ones. I really like this one, and I'm going to answer this one first. The question is there a way to determine what muscle fiber type one may have predominantly? If so, would every muscle group be the same ratio of these fibers per the group? Would it benefit to tailor a training protocol to emphasize the dominant muscle fiber type? So that's a really interesting question, a good question. Now, I think that the only accurate way, I believe, to determine that is actually with a muscle biopsy. So I think they actually have to go into the muscle and pull out some actual tissue and to see what muscle fiber type you have. Now, in general, I think most muscles are more fast twitch than slow twitch fibers. Generally, the calves may have a little bit more slow twitch fibers. The hamstrings actually supposedly have more high twitch fibers.
And what does that mean, real quick? Fast twitch versus slow twitch?
Just basically, it's the fast twitch fibers are the ones that are more. They have to do more with strength and power, and lifting heavier weights. Those are the fibers that are activated to jump fast, quickly, or high, or sporting activities where you have to take off and sprint.
Okay.
Versus fibers that'll be more like a marathon runner use, which is they don't
Endurance.
exhaust so quickly, so they're more endurance fibers. So they would come into higher rep sets.
Oh, that's what I'm good at.
Okay, so yeah, so you're probably very, very slow twitch dominant in a way. But here's a few different things. First of all, genetics does come into play. There are some people that's why there are some people who are just naturally great marathon runners. There's some people who are great sprinters.
Mm-hmm.
Some people who are just, they go into the gym and they just are able to lift very heavy weights for low reps, but when you try to have them use, a lightweight for high reps, they exhaust a lot more quickly than you would think that they would.
Okay.
So that has a lot to do with genetics. Again, also can vary from muscle group to muscle group. It's not going to be uniform throughout the entire body. You can have a slightly different a slow twitch to fast twitch ratio in the chest versus the quads. In the gastrocnemius versus the soleus muscle. So this is another thing that you have. Now, one more interesting part of the equation is that your body will also begin to adapt to the type of training that you give it. So in other words, if you decide to be some type of an endurance athlete, because the body is so intelligent, and it will realize, okay, this is what we are doing on a regular basis, we have to have more endurance, it'll start to convert some of your fiber types from fast twitch to slow twitch and vice versa. So if you're, you want to be, a bodybuilder or a power lifter or something where you need to, because the fast twitch fibers are the ones that have the most potential for muscle growth. Not that the slow twitch fibers can't hypertrophy, they can, but there's more potential in the fast twitch fibers. So when you become a bodybuilder or a powerlifter, your body again will start to convert some of the slow twitch fibers into fast twitch fibers so that you could become better at what you're practicing. So that's another thing. There are some tests that some coaches do use. Usually strength coaches or Olympic type coaches will use, which they have you do certain types of exercises, and they have you use certain percentages of your 1 rep maximum and seeing how many repetitions you get, and they kind of like have an equation to figure out whether it seems like you have where your predominance of fibers are. And those can be somewhat accurate. I wouldn't say they're definitely not as accurate as an actual muscle biopsy. So really it's kind of one of those things that I think you'll sort of discover, I mean, without going out there and getting a muscle biopsy, which 99.999% of people aren't going to do. A lot of people aren't going to necessarily go out there and work with somebody to get tested. I don't think that it's all that important. I think that, you know, if you want to be, listen, if you want to pursue something just because you know you're going to be best at it, you kind of fall into that when you're young. You start to realize, you know, like, I'll use myself as an example. When I was young, I was a pretty fast runner. I could do a good 60-yard dash and be one of the best in my class or in my school, whatever, doing that. But when it came to like doing the mile, I felt like I pretty much sucked. Like I wasn't very, very good. I would get very, very tired. And even today, you and I will work out together, Dave, you know, and I may be stronger than you if we do exercises for 3 to 4 reps. I might be able to outlift you, but you put a light weight in our hands, you out-rep me every single time, sometimes by a lot. And I think that goes to show that you actually do have more slow twitch fibers. So I think it's something you'll kind of discover on your own. And I think you may even be able to discover it if you lift long enough, body part to body part, because there are certain muscles in my body, like I think, say, for my chest, where I'm able to do, I'm a better repper. Which yes, I'm very strong, but I'm also a pretty good repper. With my biceps, I'm strong, but I'm not a good repper. So I think you could also figure out as time goes by where you kind of fit. Yeah. Now, as to the part of the question, is it better to train muscles, you know, for bodybuilding purposes, more towards what you think your predominant fiber type is? I would kind of say no to that, because I think that you have to, no matter who you are when you're bodybuilding, you have to train for hypertrophy, and the most potential for hypertrophy is going to be in the fast twitch fibers. So you're always going to want to basically train in the beginning to get stronger at basic movements using proper technique. Then after a while, you know, maybe you're not going to be able to gain much more strength, but you're still going to train. You're going to look mostly to train in rep ranges in the 6, 8, 10, 12 range most of the time. You're not thinking too much in terms of the 35, 40, 50 range. That's not to say that we don't do, because you know, if you guys watch, you know, with my training methods, I like to explore all rep ranges. I like to explore different time under tension, that type of thing. But most of our training, the bulk of our training, and the bulk, I think, of most bodybuilders' training, should be somewhere in that range of 6 to 12 repetitions, maybe for legs, up to 15 repetitions. Again, that's a little bit individual, but I still think that most, if you would look at most, whether it be pro bodybuilders, amateur bodybuilders, or just people who are in the gym and lifting, they're getting big, they're generally not training for endurance. You know, you don't see too many people who, you know, are running on the treadmill every single day with crazy endurance and going into the gym and putting, you know, 100 pounds on the bench press and getting 50 reps. Those aren't going to be the bigger guys. The bigger guys are going to be people who are able to push some weight, you know, for you know, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 reps to failure. So I understand your school of thought, and it's actually a very intelligent school of thought. But when it comes to bodybuilding, you know, you want to train predominantly the fast twitch fibers, and hopefully you have a lot of those in your body. But again, like I said before, over time your body will begin to convert some of those slow twitch fibers into fast twitch fibers to adapt to the training that you're giving it. So that's always going to be your best bet. If you ever really wanted to know what was going on, I'm sure you can go to you could probably become a part of a university study. I'm sure they have these where you can get a muscle biopsy and find out for sure, but that's going to the extremes. But that would be the only way to really know. So other than that, just keep training intelligently and you're going to grow. Awesome. Okay, so this question is about warm-ups. I think this is also a good question. I was asked by this gentleman, how do I suggest approaching warm-ups? Do I feel people should just do lightweight movements and body weight movements such as push-ups and pull-ups? Or do you think you should just, you know, take the exercise that you're doing and do, you know, 2 to 3 progressive warm-up sets before going into the work sets? I think that, you know, both of these things are good options. I think that, you know, before, I've always felt that, especially the longer you've been training, you start to have little minor injuries here and there, little aches and pains. That happens to all of us, no matter how we train, even if we train with really good form, just wear and tear on the body. I think it's good. It's always good to, and I'm guilty of not always doing this, but if I had to just lay out a protocol for somebody, if I'm training a client and I wanted to give them the best protocol, first thing I think you do is you want to raise core temperature. A warm body that has some blood flowing through it, no matter what you're going to train, is always the best way to begin a workout. So that just could be 5 minutes on a stationary cycle, or 5-10 minutes on a treadmill. Just get some blood moving, get the core temperature up is always a good thing to do. Get the body a little bit warm. Then I think depending on what you're going to train, if it's going to be upper body or lower body, some type of calisthenic type movements are excellent, like shoulder rolls and shoulder windmills, just to get the shoulder joints ready. Maybe some twists and side bends and stuff to get the lower back ready. If you're going to do legs, you could just things like high stepping and things like that. All these little calisthenic movements are just good to just get the joints warm, right in the joint, and just prepare it for what you're going to the type of movements that you're going to be doing and the muscles and joints that you're going to be activating. I think very, very important for a lot of people, even if you're not having shoulder problems. I think it's very, very important with upper body movements, especially on days that you can do pressing movements, shoulders and chest, maybe even some triceps, is getting the elbows and the rotator cuffs warm. The rotator cuffs, I think just doing some really light side laterals, front raises, rear laterals, overhead presses, and then actual internal, external rotation, whether it be with a dumbbell or a cable, is really, really good preventative medicine for those rotator cuffs, because once you start to damage the rotators, your shoulders are never the same. I do this religiously before any chest workout and any shoulder workout. I do a really good warm-up for the shoulders. And then when you come down to the actual movements themselves, I think that especially with the first movement, you definitely want to get a few progressive warm-up sets. One thing that I see people doing wrong with warm-up sets is they push them a little too far. I think that, let's use the bench press as an example, because that's such a universal movement. Now, let's just say that your first warm-up, your first real work set with bench press, say, is 275. You'll see a lot of people grab 135, they put it on the bar, and they do like 25 reps, and then they'll put 185 on the bar, and they do 15 reps, and they'll put 225 on, they'll do 8 reps, and it's not the failure, but it's a lot of reps. You don't really need to do so many repetitions. I think what you just need to do is 5 or 6 reps with each weight, just to get a progressive overload on the muscle and the joints, and also just to teach your body what range of motion it's going to be working, what plane of motion it's going to be working in. And you don't need to go crazy. If you start to do too many reps, you're going to bring in a lot of lactic acid, which can then negatively affect the work sets, because you've already kind of brought some of the lactic acid into the muscle. You've already exhausted some glycogen already, and I think it can affect those work sets. So don't overdo the warm-ups, but definitely 2 to 3 progressive warm-ups. And again, there's going to be a lot of difference between warming up for something like a deadlift, squat, bench press, leg press, where a lot of weight is used, versus a side lateral, or even a dumbbell curl. You're not going to need as many warm-ups. Then of course, once you get to the second movement, your body's a little bit more warm, so then maybe you only need 1 to 2 warm-up sets for that movement. But I think it's always good when you're changing the range of motion, when you're going from flat to incline, when you're going from lying tricep extension, push down, to overhead extension, and you're using the body differently, and you're using the joint slightly differently, and the pull on the joints and the range of motion and the plane of motion is different. It's good to just kind of say to the nervous system and the muscles, this is what we're going to be doing, before just jumping into it. So warming up is important. Like I said, if you can go through that entire sequence, you'll be pretty sure to keep off injuries, as long as you're you do the exercises properly. If you have any injuries to a certain area, you may need a little bit more warming up to do, to get a little bit more blood in there, so spend a little bit more time. But definitely don't discount warm-ups. Take the time, but again, you don't have to overdo them, because then you'll affect the workout as a whole.
Awesome.
Okay, so this question's about glutamine. This person uses it. They're not asking whether it's effective or not, or whether they should use it or not. They just want to know when's the best time to take it. Is it better to take it in the mornings, or better to take it after the workout? So, glutamine is one of those things that are a little bit controversial. Some people think you don't need it. Some people think that as long as you use your whey protein, which is high in glutamine, you don't need any extra. I don't think that glutamine is any kind of a supplement that if you don't take it, you're not going to grow or anything like that. I think personally the most important aspect of glutamine is its ability to support the immune system. Because the immune system is really kind of the gateway to everything. If your immune system isn't functioning properly, I don't think that you're going to grow optimally, because your body's going to, on the totem pole of what's important, keeping illness away and illness at bay and curing illness, infections, viruses is going to be more important than growing new muscle. So if your immune system's not functioning properly and has to work very, very hard to deal with viruses, infections, bacteria, I think it's going to have a lot less physiological energy left over for growth. So that's my little take on glutamine. Is it a miracle worker? No, I think it's something that is good in conjunction with things like vitamin D, vitamin C, and some other nutrients. Now, as when to take it, if you're going to take regular L-glutamine, I do believe that it's best to take it away from protein, away from a whole protein. I think it's absorbed a lot better if it's taken separately, so basically on an empty stomach. I think the best times to take it is first thing in the morning, because yes, you are on a completely empty stomach first thing in the morning, and then maybe wait 15, 20, 30 minutes before you actually eat a protein. I also think that it's good to take pre-workout, not so much post-workout. I'll tell you why in a moment. Pre-workout, again, if you could take it maybe 30 minutes before your pre-workout meal, or if you have or if you eat a pre-workout meal and then you have 2 hours before you train, maybe an hour or an hour and a half after that meal, but keep it away from the whole protein. I think that's another good time to take it. And even before bed, maybe even your last meal, 30 minutes before your last meal, or an hour after your last meal before bed is another good time to take it. Why I don't like to take it after the workout is because there is some evidence, and why take a chance, that glutamine will actually interfere with leucine in stimulating the mTOR pathway, which is a huge trigger igniter of muscle growth. So I like to take L-leucine right after a workout to help stimulate mTOR. Best times to take it right after you've trained, because that's when you're most sensitive to it. And so I don't like to take glutamine at that time, because I feel that glutamine, from what I've read, can possibly block the action of L-leucine and blunt what it does to the mTOR pathway. So why take that chance, since there's other times you can take it that's better. So again, morning, pre-workout, before bed, away from proteins, that's your best bet.
Awesome.
Okay, so one more question that I got was about rear delts. Now, this person has very, very limited equipment. They're training at home during this lockdown. The only thing they really have is a barbell, a couple light plates, and a curling bar. And he told me that he's training for shoulders. That's an area that he's really trying to bring up. He said, obviously for the front deltoid, he's able to do some presses, barbell presses. He's able to do front raises with a barbell. For the side shoulder, he's been using primarily wide grip, shoulder width grip, upright row to hit the side delts, but he's not really sure what to do with the rear delts. So I brought a little curling bar with me from Bakersfield, brought it here to Marina del Rey just to show you a couple of exercises that you can do for the rear delts just using a barbell or a curling bar, and I'm going to demonstrate those for you in just a minute. Okay, so this first movement for rear delts is going to be a bent over barbell row, but it's a little bit different than the normal bent row. You're going to want to lean over at about 90 degrees so that your torso is basically parallel to the ground. And what you're going to do is you're going to lift the bar up into the chest, preferably the upper portion of the chest, because when you do this, the elbows come out. It takes some of the lats out of the movement, and it brings a lot more of the rear delts, the posterior delts, into the movement, as well as the mid traps. And this is a great movement for the rear delts if you don't have any dumbbells. Okay, so the next movement that I like to do for rear delts with just a barbell is it's kind of like a shrug behind the back, or you can call it a rear delt barbell raise. And so this movement is where you're kind of doing an integration or a hybrid of an upright row and a shrug behind the back. You want to tuck the glutes in just a little bit so the bar can get up nice and high, and you're going to be raising the elbows up. It's a kind of a short movement. It's more of like a real contracted movement. You're not getting much of a stretch on it, but when you bring the elbows back in this manner and you don't just shrug but you upright row it as well, it strongly engages the posterior delts as well in this movement along with the traps, but you're going to get a nice burn in the rear delts. It's another great movement to do with just a barbell. Okay, this movement is a crouching rear delt barbell raise. Now, this is probably a movement, I did not invent this movement, I'm not taking credit for it, but you don't see it done very much in gyms. It's very, very rare to see it. Sometimes people will do it with dumbbells. You don't have dumbbells, so I'm going to just talk about it with a barbell. This is a really, really interesting movement for the rear delt because, again, you're crouching over and you're bringing the bar back behind you with a slight bend in the elbows, but the manner in which you're bringing the bar back will very, very strongly activate the rear delts or to force the rear delts to do the work. You don't even get too much trap involved. It's almost entirely rear delt, and you'll feel, it feels very, very easy in the beginning, like the first few reps. You're not even using a lot of weight to do this movement properly, but you can really, really feel the fatigue set in towards the end, and in those last few reps, you really can't cheat. So it becomes very, very difficult to raise the weight with the rear delts, and it really is an excellent movement. Even if you do have access to other equipment, I'd recommend putting this into your rear delt routine.
Awesome.